The Icarus drifted through the empty void of space, its engines humming softly as it glided toward an ancient, forgotten world. The planet, designated as Soldier 7, had been mapped centuries ago, but had never been given much attention. It was a barren rock, covered in endless dust storms and devoid of any significant life. Yet, for reasons unknown, it had drawn the attention of the deep space exploration team aboard the Icarus. Captain Aidan Reynolds stood at the helm, staring at the planet through the ship's viewing window, his thoughts consumed with a strange anomaly detected in the planet's orbit, a faint signal, almost imperceptible but unmistakable. It was a distress beacon of sorts, though there was no sign of civilization anywhere on Soldier 7. Curiosity had driven the crew to investigate, and as they made their descent to the planet's surface, none could predict what they were about to uncover. As the Icarus touched down on the rocky terrain, the crew disembarked, their boots crunching on the dry, cracked earth. The air was thin, and the temperature was freezing, but they were determined to find out what lay beneath the planet's surface. They found it quickly, a massive structure, half buried beneath the dust and stone, as if it had been hidden for eons. It was unlike anything the crew had ever seen, a vast alien artifact with strange, glowing symbols etched into its surface. The markings seemed to shimmer as though alive, and the air around it hummed with a low frequency that seemed to vibrate in their bones. Dr. Leah Stanton, the Icarus chief archaeologist, was the first to approach the artifact. Her mind raced with possibilities as she examined the symbols, each one more complex than the last. This isn't just a monument," she murmured, her voice filled with awe. "It's a message." The crew worked tirelessly for days, uncovering layer after layer of alien technology and deciphering the strange symbols. The deeper they dug, the more intricate the messages became. Eventually, they uncovered a large central chamber within the artifact, and within it, a massive stone tablet stood, inscribed with a mixture of familiar galactic languages and one that was completely unknown. The tablet seemed to pulse with energy as if it were alive, and Dr. Stanton, with her expert knowledge, began the painstaking task of translating the unfamiliar language. Hours passed as she pieced together the words, each translation more terrifying than the last. The prophecy, as it became known, spoke of a species from the farthest reaches of the galaxy, a species that had been hidden from the larger, more advanced civilizations for eons. According to the prophecy, this species, humanity, would rise from a small, insignificant planet and possess a power that would challenge the very foundations of the galaxy. The message described humanity as an anomaly, an unpredictable force with the ability to destroy entire empires, destabilize the balance of power between advanced civilizations, and even alter the fabric of reality itself. The warning was clear. This species must never be allowed to awaken, for if it did, it would bring ruin to all who stood in its way. Dr. Stanton's fingers trembled as she read the final lines of the prophecy, her mind racing to comprehend what she had uncovered. It spoke of a hidden potential within humanity, a power that lay dormant until the right moment, until it was awakened by some unknown catalyst. What was more chilling was the fact that the prophecy did not seem to be a mere legend. It was a warning that had been passed down for generations by countless galactic empires, each one fearful of humanity's unknown potential. The crew gathered around, each one processing the gravity of what they had just discovered. Captain Reynolds, his face pale, turned to Dr. Stanton, his voice low. "Why would an entire galaxy fear a species that hasn't even made its mark yet?" Dr. Stanton's answer came in a whisper, barely audible against the eerie silence of the chamber. "Because we don't even know what we're capable of yet." The crew stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. The realization that humanity was not just another species in the galaxy, but one with the potential to reshape the future, was enough to send chills down their spines. What did this mean for them? What did it mean for the rest of the galaxy? And most importantly, who had left this warning and why? The questions swirled around them, unanswered, as the Icarus crew made the difficult decision to return to Earth and share their findings. But as they prepared to leave Soldier 7, none of them could shake the feeling that they were being watched, that somehow, someone or something had known they would find this. The seeds of fear had been planted, and it was only a matter of time before the galaxy learned the terrifying truth about humanity. The universe had never feared a species quite like this before, and now, with the prophecy revealed, humanity's destiny was no longer a question, it was a terrifying certainty. The news of the Icarus crew's discovery on Soldier 7 spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The encrypted message, revealing the ancient prophecy about humanity's potential, reached every corner of the known universe. At first, it seemed like just another piece of strange galactic history, but the more it was examined, the more it raised alarms. The once small human race, tucked away on a forgotten blue planet in the Milky Way, was suddenly the center of attention. Alien councils, once indifferent or dismissive of humanity, now questioned the very nature of the species. Some factions saw humanity as a dangerous new threat, a species capable of destabilizing the delicate balance of power in the galaxy. Others viewed them with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. What was it that made them different from any other race? What was it about humanity that had caused the galaxy's ancient civilizations to fear them for so long? These questions churned in the minds of leaders, strategists, and scholars across the stars. Back aboard the Icarus, Dr. Leah Stanton, the chief scientist who had uncovered the prophecy, found herself drawn deeper into the mystery. She was no longer just an archaeologist studying ancient ruins. She was now one of the key figures in the unfolding crisis. As the tension between humanity and the galactic powers grew, Dr. Stanton began to investigate the strange history of humanity's rapid technological advancements. What she found was both astounding and unsettling. Human progress, from the invention of faster-than-light travel to the development of quantum computing, seemed to happen far too quickly, as if pushed forward by an invisible hand. These advancements had come in waves, each one more groundbreaking than the last, with no clear explanation for how or why they occurred. Humanity's rise, compared to other species in the galaxy, was unprecedented. It was as though there was a hidden force driving them forward, propelling them into realms of science and technology that no one had expected. Dr. Stanton dug deeper, reaching back into humanity's early history. The more she researched, the more she found that each breakthrough, the first successful colonization of other planets, the harnessing of atomic energy, the discovery of quantum mechanics, had been accompanied by strange, unexplained events. Unsettling patterns began to emerge. There were stories of brilliant scientists making breakthroughs in moments of intense personal crisis, inventors stumbling upon ideas that should have been impossible, and entire teams of researchers making radical advancements overnight, with no clear understanding of how they had done it. It was as if humanity had been guided or even nudged in a specific direction, towards something larger, something greater, something terrifying. One breakthrough stood out to Dr. Stanton more than the others: humanity's sudden leap to faster-than-light travel. The discovery of warp drive had been made by a team of young scientists who, despite their limited resources, had managed to create a working prototype. What was even stranger was that shortly before this breakthrough, several scientists on the project had experienced vivid dreams of distant stars and strange, otherworldly symbols. Could these dreams have been more than mere coincidence? Were they somehow connected to the ancient prophecy? As she pieced together the fragmented history of humanity's achievements, Dr. Stanton came to a chilling conclusion. Humanity had always had a hidden potential, one that had been dormant for centuries, perhaps millennia. This potential had been slowly awakening, guided by an unknown force or influence. The question that gnawed at her, though, was what had caused this sudden surge of power. What had triggered this hidden ability within the human race? Was it the discovery of the prophecy on Soldier 7, or had humanity's rapid development always been part of a much larger plan, one that had been set in motion long before their first steps into space? Dr. Stanton shared her findings with Captain Aidan Reynolds, who, like many others, had begun to sense that humanity's fate was no longer in their own hands. The galaxy had already begun to react to their newfound status. The alien factions, now aware of humanity's potential, were taking steps to either contain or control them. Some proposed that humanity should be quarantined, isolated from the rest of the galaxy to prevent their dangerous abilities from spiraling out of control. Others suggested that humans could be used as pawns in their political games, their powers harnessed for the benefit of whichever faction could gain control. And then there were those who feared that humanity's rise was inevitable, and that resistance was futile. But the most pressing question of all remained unanswered. What would humanity do with this newfound power? Would they allow themselves to be manipulated by outside forces, or would they take control of their destiny? Dr. Stanton feared that the answer might not come easily. Humanity, as it turned out, was on the verge of awakening something far greater than they could possibly imagine. What had once been a simple species on the edge of the galaxy was now a force that could reshape the very fabric of the universe itself. But the path forward was unclear. Would humanity rise to meet this challenge, or would it collapse under the weight of its own potential? The answers were still hidden, buried beneath layers of ancient history, waiting to be uncovered. And in the depths of space, something was watching, something ancient, something powerful, and it knew that humanity's time had come. The calm of the human colonies was shattered when the Zelgar Imperium, one of the oldest and most powerful empires in the galaxy, arrived in human space. For centuries, the Zelgar had ruled with an iron fist, maintaining an empire that stretched across vast regions of the galaxy. Their efficiency was unmatched, their technology superior, and their ruthlessness legendary. Now they had come to Earth's doorstep. Their fleet, vast and imposing, entered the solar system with the cold precision of a predator closing in on its prey. The Zelgar were not here for diplomacy. They were not here to discuss trade or peace. They were here to make a demand that would change everything for humanity. Aboard their flagship, the Zelvaris, the Zelgar Council convened. Their leader, High Commander Volta, was a being of ancient wisdom, his long reign marked by an unyielding drive to maintain the Zelgar's supremacy. He had studied the prophecy in detail, as had many of his advisors, and he understood the danger humanity now posed. The rise of this insignificant species from a remote planet had thrown the entire galaxy into disarray. The Zelgar had seen countless civilizations rise and fall, but never one with such rapid and unpredictable growth. The prophecy spoke of a species that could overthrow empires, destabilize advanced civilizations, and even tear the very fabric of reality. For centuries, the Zelgar had been prepared for this moment, but they had underestimated how quickly humanity had progressed. In a cold, calculating message sent to Earth, High Commander Volta made his offer clear. Humanity has been marked, the message read. Your rise will bring ruin to all you touch. Cease all technological advancements. Stay within your solar system and never again attempt to reach beyond it. If you comply, we will spare your species. But if you defy us, you will face the full wrath of the Zelgar Imperium. The message sent shockwaves through the United Nations and the coalition of Earth's leaders. The entire planet, united in a common cause, watched in stunned silence as the offer was debated. There was no question in Dr. Leah Stanton's mind, though. She had spent years studying the history of humanity's technological leaps, and she knew that this was not just a warning, it was a challenge. The Zelgar believed that humanity could be controlled, subdued, contained. But Dr. Stanton understood that to do so would be to forsake the very future of humankind. The prophecy had not spoken of humanity's power to be ruled, it spoke of humanity's ability to reshape the galaxy, and they would not let that chance slip away. With the support of a coalition of leaders, Dr. Stanton rejected the Zelgar's offer. We will not bow to fear, she declared to the world. We will not allow anyone to dictate our future. Humanity will rise on its own terms. The decision was made. There would be no surrender. The galaxy would learn that humanity was not so easily controlled. The Zelgar's response was swift and brutal. The moment the humans rejected their terms, the first shots were fired. The Zelgar fleet unleashed a barrage of energy blasts that tore through the outer defenses of Earth's colonies. The attacks were calculated, designed not to destroy the human colonies outright, but to send a clear message: defy the Zelgar, and the galaxy would burn. As Earth's forces rallied to defend their territory, the shock of war settled in. The Zelgar had not underestimated humanity's resolve, but they had severely miscalculated the power hidden within the human race. The Zelgar's technological might was unmatched, but they were unprepared for the unexpected resilience of humanity, a species that had survived and thrived despite countless odds. The first skirmishes were brutal. Human forces, bolstered by the rapid development of advanced weaponry and new technologies, pushed back against the invaders. But this was only the beginning. Across the galaxy, the Zelgar issued their warning: beware the humans. The message spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of the galaxy as more factions and empires began to take notice of humanity's defiance. Some chose to side with the Zelgar, seeing them as the only power capable of keeping humanity in check. Others, however, saw an opportunity to ally with this newly awakened species. The galactic balance was shifting, and no one knew where the chips would fall. In the midst of the chaos, Dr. Stanton watched as the situation spiraled out of control. She knew that humanity's survival depended not just on their technological prowess, but on their unity. The coming war would test their very identity. Would they be able to hold their ground, or would they become another casualty in the endless cycle of galactic empires? As the Zelgar fleet loomed above Earth, their threats echoed in her mind. But deep down, Dr. Stanton knew one thing for certain: humanity had just taken its first step toward a future where it was no longer bound by the rules of the old galaxy. A new era was dawning, and whether the universe was ready or not, humanity would shape it. As the war with the Zelgar Imperium escalated, strange and inexplicable events began to unfold across human colonies, sending ripples of uncertainty and fear through the ranks. At first, the incidents were small, unnoticed by most, but impossible to ignore once they started to pile up. A soldier stationed on a distant moon in the Andromeda colony had been caught in a violent assault, with a direct hit from an enemy energy weapon tearing through the front lines. The blast should have killed him instantly. Instead, the soldier staggered to his feet, miraculously alive, with no explanation for how he survived. His body had been completely unharmed, as if the weapon's energy had simply bypassed him. Soon, similar occurrences started to surface across human territories. Engineers, who had been working tirelessly on the construction of a new type of quantum reactor, began noticing inexplicable changes in the way their systems operated. One technician, while experimenting with the reactor's power output, accidentally rewired it in a way that no one had thought possible. The result was an energy output 10 times greater than its intended capacity. Yet, the reactor remained stable, with no discernible explanation for why the energy surge didn't cause a catastrophic meltdown. There was no scientific model that could explain this sudden, unprecedented efficiency. As these incidents continued to grow in frequency, they escalated to something even more extraordinary. A group of soldiers, during a routine mission on a barren planet, found themselves facing a Zelgar ambush. Trapped in a narrow canyon with no way out, one of the soldiers, an unassuming private, focused his mind on the rocks above. To the shock of his comrades, the rocks above them began to shift and move, as though controlled by an unseen hand, creating an opening in the canyon wall large enough for the team to escape. The soldier had not been trained in such an ability, and no one could understand how he had done it. Telekinesis, an ability thought to belong only in science fiction, had become real. The most unsettling discoveries came soon after. Telepathy. It started with whispers in the minds of soldiers during battles, faint voices that no one else could hear, but which guided them to safety or gave them insight into enemy positions. Soon, it became clear that these abilities weren't limited to just a few individuals. They were spreading across humanity. Groups of civilians and military personnel began reporting strange dreams, visions, and voices that seemed to communicate directly with them, bypassing the limitations of language or sound. What was more disturbing was the consistency with which these powers appeared to manifest. It was as if some ancient force within humanity's genetic makeup was finally awakening after millennia of dormancy. The reality hit the human leaders with full force. These powers, once thought to be the stuff of myth and legend, were no longer a theoretical possibility. Humanity was waking up to a force far beyond anything they had ever known or prepared for. The question that gnawed at Dr. Leah Stanton and the other scientists was, what had triggered this awakening? The prophecy had warned of humanity's potential to reshape the galaxy, but the abilities that were now surfacing went beyond what the ancient texts had hinted at. This wasn't just a matter of technological advancement. This was something far deeper, something that connected the human mind and body in ways that defied every law of nature known to the galaxy. In underground laboratories, where the brightest minds worked feverishly to understand this new phenomenon, the truth began to take shape. A hidden ancient force, buried deep within the human genome, was beginning to surface. It was a dormant power that had been encoded into humanity's DNA for generations, perhaps even millennia. Some theorized that this force had been deliberately placed there by an ancient civilization long forgotten, a race that had seen the potential for humanity's awakening and had encoded it into their very biology. Others believed it was the product of evolution itself, a natural progression of the human species, now triggered by some unknown cosmic event. As humanity's abilities grew stronger, so did the fear that the galaxy had felt for centuries. The Zelgar Imperium, which had been one of the first to notice humanity's rise, now watched in growing horror as humans began to defy the laws of physics. They had tried to contain humanity with threats and demands, but now it was clear. They could no longer control the species they once believed so easily subdued. The Zelgar's own technology, once seen as invincible, was now threatened by the rapidly evolving human mind. The universe, once a vast and uncaring place, now seemed to be shifting beneath humanity's feet. Alien factions, who had once looked upon humanity with indifference or even disdain, were now watching with wary eyes. Some feared that humanity's awakening would bring destruction to their carefully balanced worlds. Others saw it as an opportunity to ally with a species that could shape the future of the galaxy. But one thing was certain: humanity's true potential had been unleashed, and there was no turning back. What had started as a series of strange, inexplicable events had now become a force that could change the course of the universe itself. Dr. Stanton, looking out at the stars, realized that humanity had become something more than anyone could have anticipated. They were no longer merely a species struggling to survive in the galaxy. They were something new, something powerful, something dangerous. And as their powers grew, so did the weight of the questions that lay before them. What would humanity choose to do with this power? And would they be able to control it, or would it consume them? The awakening had begun, and the answers could change everything. The sudden eruption of humanity's latent powers sent shockwaves across the galaxy, rattling civilizations that had long believed in their superiority. For centuries, humanity had been viewed as a fledgling species, small, unremarkable, and easily dismissed by the more advanced races. But that perception was shattered overnight. As humans displayed abilities that defied all known laws of physics, telekinesis, matter manipulation, even telepathy, alien species who once considered humans weak now trembled in fear. The galaxy, once filled with a fragile peace, was now on the brink of chaos. In response, a coalition of galactic powers was swiftly formed. Known as the Galactic Alliance, this union was composed of the most powerful and ancient races in the universe, each fearing the rise of humanity and the potential havoc it could bring. The Alliance's primary goal was clear: to prevent humanity from growing any stronger, to contain their powers before they could spread beyond control. Fleet after fleet was mobilized, and the most advanced technologies were deployed to keep humanity in check. The message sent to every corner of the galaxy was simple: Humanity's rise must be stopped at all costs. Yet, not all factions within the galaxy agreed with this stance. Among the stars, there were those who saw humanity's newfound powers as something far more tantalizing. These factions, some disillusioned with their own corrupt leadership, others motivated by greed, believed that if they could control humanity, they could harness these extraordinary abilities for themselves. The very powers that the Alliance feared could become the ultimate weapon, a tool to conquer the universe. With the right leverage, humanity could be manipulated and used as a pawn in a greater galactic game of power. In the midst of this rising tension, a movement began to take shape. It was a coalition of rebels, both human and alien, who had come to realize that the solution to the growing conflict was not war, but cooperation. These rebels saw the potential for a peaceful coexistence between humans and the other species of the galaxy, advocating for the shared development of knowledge and power rather than the destruction of one species or another. They understood the inherent danger in the growing powers of humanity, but they also believed that those powers could be harnessed for good, for the benefit of all races. They argued that the universe had a choice to either unite and work together or risk annihilation through constant conflict. This movement, however, was not without its enemies. The Galactic Alliance, unified in their fear of humanity, saw the rebels as traitors, willing to put the entire galaxy at risk in favor of an idealistic dream. The divide between the two factions only deepened as the rebellion gained momentum. While some alien races began to support the idea of peaceful cooperation, others aligned themselves with the Alliance, seeing the rising human threat as an existential crisis they could not afford to ignore. Soon, the galaxy was divided into two factions, those who wished to suppress humanity and those who saw it as an opportunity to reshape the future. Meanwhile, humanity itself was caught in the middle. The leaders of Earth, led by Dr. Leah Stanton, were under immense pressure. The human race had become the focal point of a galactic struggle, with powerful forces trying to control or eliminate them, while others wanted to use them as tools for their own ambitions. Earth had become a battleground for ideologies, some advocating for resistance, others for negotiation, but all aware of the consequences of failure. Every decision made by humanity's leaders could mean the difference between survival or destruction. The pressure on Dr. Stanton and her coalition was mounting, and the choices they made now would shape the fate of the galaxy. In the meantime, humanity's powers continued to grow at an alarming rate. What had started as small incidents, an engineer accidentally enhancing a quantum reactor or a soldier surviving an impossible attack, had now escalated to full-blown demonstrations of supernatural abilities. The sheer scale of power was unimaginable. Some humans, once ordinary citizens, were now capable of altering the very fabric of reality itself. Entire cities had been levitated, storms had been calmed with a thought, and minds could now communicate over vast distances. The possibilities seemed endless, but so did the danger. If these powers fell into the wrong hands, the results could be catastrophic. The very fabric of the universe could be torn apart. Time, however, was running out. The growing tension between the Galactic Alliance and the rebellion was reaching its boiling point, and a catastrophic war seemed inevitable. Humanity was at the center of it all, and Dr. Stanton feared that the struggle to control their future would lead to a galactic war that could decimate all of civilization. If the Alliance succeeded, humanity would be forced into submission. If the rebels prevailed, there was no telling how far their powers could be pushed before they spiraled out of control. Either way, the galaxy was on the brink of an explosion, and humanity's place in that future would determine the fate of every living being. Dr. Stanton stood on the observation deck of the Icarus, watching the stars streak by. She knew that humanity had awakened to something far greater than anyone had anticipated. But now, the challenge wasn't just about surviving. It was about understanding their power and deciding what kind of future they wanted to create. Would they become the saviors of the galaxy, or would they be its ultimate destroyers? The answer, she knew, lay within humanity's choice, and time was quickly running out. The war between humanity and the galaxy's factions reached a fever pitch as the conflict spread across star systems, leaving chaos in its wake. The once unthinkable idea that humanity could become a formidable force was now a harsh reality. With their newfound powers, humans had evolved into warriors unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. Telekinesis, matter manipulation, and telepathy became tools of war, and their effects were nothing short of devastating. What had once been whispered about as myths, stories of humans rising to unimaginable power, were now becoming fact, and the galaxy trembled in fear. The Zelgar Imperium, the galaxy's most powerful empire, found itself struggling to maintain its hold over Earth's colonies. At first, the Zelgar had underestimated humanity's abilities, thinking they could crush them with their superior military might. But as human forces began to unite and harness their strange new powers, the Zelgar were forced to retreat. The once invincible Zelgar fleet found itself overwhelmed by human resistance, as entire enemy ships were ripped apart by invisible forces or crushed by seemingly unexplainable bursts of energy. The humans had become a terrifying force, fierce and relentless. But the victory, though hard-earned, came at a cost. As the Zelgar were driven back, the leaders of humanity began to confront a difficult truth. The prophecy that had once seemed like a vague warning was now undeniable. Humanity had been destined for something far greater than merely surviving in the galaxy. It had been foretold that humanity would not only rise, but that it would have the power to shape the galaxy according to its will. The words of the prophecy echoed in the minds of Earth's leaders as they saw their species rise from the ashes of war, their abilities growing with each passing day. The question now became, was humanity truly meant to live peacefully alongside other species, or was it destined to rule over them? As humanity's powers continued to expand, so too did the internal divisions within their ranks. Some of the most powerful humans, those whose abilities far surpassed even the most advanced alien species, began to question whether they should follow the path of peace or seize the opportunity to dominate the galaxy. The idea of ruling, of controlling the fate of all other species, began to take root among certain factions. These individuals, emboldened by the immense power they now wielded, argued that the galaxy had no place for weak or divided species. The Zelgar had tried to destroy them. The other alien races had plotted against them. In their minds, humanity's survival could no longer be guaranteed by peaceful coexistence. It could only be secured through domination. Dr. Leah Stanton, still one of humanity's leading voices for peace, found herself caught in the middle of this growing conflict. As a scientist, she had always believed that humanity's power was meant to be a force for good, a way to protect their species and bring harmony to a fractured galaxy. But the events unfolding around her were making her question everything. She had witnessed the fear in the eyes of the alien leaders, the desperation in their messages. Humanity's rise was no longer just a challenge, it was a threat. And if humanity continued down this path, she feared they might become the very thing they had once fought against. At the same time, there were others who still clung to the ideals of peace and unity. These rebels, who had once advocated for cooperation with alien races, now found themselves in an increasingly difficult position. With humanity's powers growing stronger by the day, the stakes of the war had changed. The question of whether to dominate or coexist became more pressing, as both sides realized that the outcome of this conflict would shape the future of the galaxy itself. As the battle for control continued, the galaxy's factions began to shift alliances. The once strong unity of the Galactic Alliance began to fracture as some species realized that the power humanity held could be used to challenge the old order. Some races, those that had initially feared humanity's rise, now saw an opportunity to ally with them. They believed that if humanity could be persuaded to fight alongside them, they could reshape the galaxy's power structure. Others, however, saw humanity's growing power as a final nail in the coffin of the old empires. The Zelgar, still reeling from their defeat, began to form secret alliances with other alien races, preparing for a new round of battle that could either crush humanity's newfound strength or solidify their dominance forever. Dr. Stanton, torn between the conflicting ideologies, knew that the future of the galaxy hung in the balance. The actions of humanity, whether they chose to follow the path of peace or domination, would define the fate of all. Every decision now carried immense weight. As the final battles approached, it became clear that humanity's true test was not just about survival or victory. It was about what kind of species they would become. Would they live up to the potential of their prophecy, using their powers to unite the galaxy, or would they fall victim to the same lust for power that had destroyed so many civilizations before them? The choice, as always, would lie with humanity. And that choice would determine the future of the universe itself. The galaxy, once a vast and indifferent space, had now become a battlefield where the fate of humanity hung in the balance. After humanity's incredible rise, their powers grew exponentially, and with it, the galaxy's fear. The Zelgar Imperium, once the most powerful empire, had been forced to retreat after humanity's astonishing ability to turn the tide of battle. The war, which had seemed inevitable, had now become a bitter and intense struggle between those who wanted to control humanity and those who feared its potential. But with every passing day, humanity's abilities evolved, shifting from mere survival to something more formidable. The humans, once divided and unsure of their place in the galaxy, began to unite under the common banner of survival and power. No longer was humanity a species to be pushed around, dismissed, or ignored. They were changing the very laws of physics with their newfound abilities. Ships could be dismantled mid-flight by telekinetic forces, and entire fleets found themselves crippled by invisible forces. What had once seemed impossible, telepathy, reality manipulation, and even matter bending, became the reality of every human. The forces that had once viewed humanity as weak or insignificant were now the ones caught in the crossfire. But as their powers grew, so did their internal conflict. Some believed that humanity's rise was meant to rule the galaxy, to dominate and reshape everything. Others, like Dr. Leah Stanton, feared what such power could do if it fell into the wrong hands. She had seen the consequences of unchecked ambition before, and she knew that power without control was a dangerous game. The leaders of humanity gathered in secret, debating their next move. Some, driven by the prophecy that had started it all, argued that humanity's destiny was to become rulers of the galaxy. It was clear now. The prophecy had spoken of their rise, their power, and their potential to topple empires. They argued that this was their birthright, to lead, to conquer, to shape the future of all species. It was a tempting vision, one that promised ultimate power and control over their future. But there were others, like Stanton, who cautioned against such a path. They had already seen what the other factions were willing to do to stop them. A peaceful path, she believed, was the only hope of keeping humanity from becoming just another tyrant in the galaxy's endless cycle of conquest. But as the debates raged on, something darker began to stir within humanity itself. The more they used their powers, the more some began to relish in it. The abilities that had once been used for survival, for defense, were now being used offensively. The sense of invincibility that came with such power began to corrupt some of humanity's leaders, making them question the wisdom of restraint. Could the galaxy, with its ancient empires, truly accept humanity as equals? Or was it time to take what they had been given and reshape the universe according to their own vision? Every victory, every use of their powers, seemed to bring them closer to a decision they couldn't take back. The lines between self-defense and domination blurred, and with it, the ideals of peace began to fray. The galactic factions, once united in their fear of humanity's rise, were now divided. The Galactic Alliance, formed to stop humanity, was beginning to crack. Some of its members, initially united in their goal of containing the human threat, began to see the power humanity wielded as an opportunity rather than a threat. They whispered among themselves that if they could control humanity's powers, they could use them to tip the balance in their favor. Others, however, saw the growing power as the ultimate weapon, one that could not be allowed to grow unchecked. The galaxy was now at war, not just between humanity and the established empires, but within itself. Different alien factions began forming their own alliances, each with their own ideas about what should happen to the humans. Some wanted peace, others saw a chance to use humanity to advance their own causes, and others still feared that humanity would become an unstoppable force of destruction if left unchecked. As the war escalated, Dr. Stanton realized the situation had become even more precarious. Each decision they made, each new victory or loss, would have lasting consequences. Humanity had reached a crossroads. They could either choose to build a future where their power was a tool for peace, or they could let their ambition and hunger for control spiral out of hand, leading to an endless cycle of war and conquest. It was no longer just a matter of surviving the war with the Zelgar. It was about ensuring that humanity would not become the very thing they had once feared. In every battle, in every move they made, the future of the galaxy was being written. Humanity's rise was no longer a question of if, but how it would unfold. The choice was in their hands, but the consequences of that choice were far greater than anyone could have imagined.